sitting in the pack. You don't psychologically get that same benefit of following the wheel, but there is a huge gap between being the person who is on the front setting the pace versus sitting mid-pack and getting some drafting benefit.
Yeah, it's also like in real life racing on the outdoors, when you're on the wheel, you do get that bit of draft, and Zwift, you do get a draft and a bit easier as well in game. So they have that effect. So it definitely is better to be sitting in that Peloton, but you don't want to be too far back, because if someone does lose the wheel, then it's quite hard to bridge that. So, yeah, you're seeing Georgia Whitehouse still right up the front there, and Matilda Reynolds as well, another rider that races a lot on Zwift. And I heard she's just got a brand new Wahoo kicker the other day, thanks to a fellow cyclist in the bunch, Peter Mullins. Peter got 4 kickers, I heard, from her bike shop, and told her staff that this is hot commodity. We don't want to be selling these at any discounted rates, until she found out that one of those people that she sold the kicker to was actually Matilda Reynolds. So there might be some rivalry in today's race between those two ladies, but yeah, I think Peter might have helped her out a little bit later when she found out the fact that she sold it to another female cyclist.
So did she give her a discount or not?
Yeah, I heard there's an envelope with some cash heading Matilda's way. So I don't know if Matilda knows this, but Matilda, if you're listening, now you do.
Depend on the outcome from today. Matilda Reynolds is a really good rider. She's had a fantastic start to the season. She got a 3rd place finish on one of the stages at the Tour Down Under, and she's got plenty of horsepower, but I'm not sure this is the perfect course for her. That last climb might be a little tough. One of the riders that I've seen a fair bit up towards the front has been Kate Perry, and she's just started doing a podcast. She juggles life as a lecturer at the University of La Trobe University. She does coaching. She's a brilliant athlete as well, racing at the national level and winning plenty of races at this level. She's just started doing a podcast where she interviews athletes about goal setting and so on, and she did a really good one to start off with Luke Platt, who's in the national squad. It was selected for the Olympic Games, actually, for Tokyo for this year, but hopefully he still gets that spot for next year as part of the team's pursuit squad. And I'm sure you can well appreciate this, Rihanna, that ability to juggle so many balls at the one time. And Kate Perry, she does that so well.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I take my hat off to any of these athletes, because, you know, the amount of work that has to go in to be at this elite level, most of them, particularly the women, will probably juggling families and having to do just the day-to-day chores of that, and then having to work on top of that. I mean, it's phenomenal what these ladies do, and the men as well. So absolutely, it's, you know, to be able to continue to hold a consistent level that is required to be an elite athlete. You know, I absolutely dip my hat to these ladies, and, you know, I'm just looking now at the watts that these ladies are putting out, and trying to put put that into perspective compared to the watts that I've put out when I'm on Zwift, and I wouldn't want to be in this race myself.
I've got it in perspective. I've got it in perspective, and that's why I'm commentating.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm sitting in this chair right now.
It looks like the group has thinned out a little bit, Carly.
Yeah, the pace has been on. I was actually just going to say, Rihanna and I raced this series last year, and when I was looking at the results and the watts that these ladies were racing at in race 1, I saw that the winner of last year's race, Brie Wilson, this year is riding 40 watts higher just to stay in the bunch. That's the level that it has increased, and it's awesome to see so many more women racing today. But it just shows how much women's cycling is improving and getting that depth. And as you can see, like, they're sitting at 60 kilometers an hour right now, which is they're not cruising along. They're going quite fast.
Well, looking
And
at the
just to
numbers
correct
from
you, Carly, you raced, I didn't. I participated. So I just was taking part.
Well, we're on board now with Nicole Frayne, who was really good in the opening round. She finished in third position, and she's only been in the sport for 2 years effectively. She's had support from the Tasmanian Institute of Sport. She's had support from KOM Finance. She's riding here for Sydney Uni Staminade. She's had coaching support as well from Donna Ray Zielinski. I've had more messages about Nicole Frayne than I have about just about anybody else in this series. And I'm hoping that Nicole finishes somewhere near the front today, because I think that she can actually win this series overall. Have you had much of a chance to see her in action on the road, Carly? Because she hasn't actually really been racing for all that long.
Yeah, I saw that she got more into cycling after an injury in triathlon in 2017. But I have heard that she doesn't mind a hill or two. So I think she might actually be really looking forward to today. This is one of 2 hilltop finishes that we have during the series. The other one being stage 5, the TT in Bologna. So I think it's a really good opportunity if you're going for the overall GC in this to use today to put you in that good position leading into some of the hillier circuits, but also that time trial later in the series. So I think you're right, definitely one to watch. And when all the ladies are messaging you and giving you a bit of a down low on who they think is flying, they're not all saying that for no reason. There's generally some truth behind that. So yeah, going to be interesting to see.
The results show it that she's well worth talking about. And back to the numbers, and as you pointed out, Rihanna, the numbers are enormous. And taking a look at second place from the first round, which was Georgia Whitehouse, she averaged for the race, which was about 31 kilometres for memory, 299 watts in second position, which was 4.7 watts per kilo. And the winner of the race was Vicky Whitelaw, who averaged 4.6 watts per kilo, which goes back to the conversation a little earlier on, that it's not an individual time trial. As Tommy Ing pointed out on the Zwift Live community, it's not just an individual time trial. Tactics do come into play. But in terms of pure numbers, they are big numbers to be punching out for that length of time. There are a lot of watts. And these are women that weigh just around about 60 kilos. So they're big, big numbers.
Yeah, and to put it in perspective as well, Matt, those numbers are pretty much what pro cyclists are racing when there was racing at the moment in real life. So they're really right up there with some of the best in the world. It just kind of shows the awesome depth and strength that we have in Australia, and it's so awesome seeing so many of the NRS races and teams part in this series.
This is Maeve Plouffe, who we're
very
on board
impressive
with.
numbers.
I know
Far
that
away,
we're
Rihanna.
obviously not racing. Obviously during this coronavirus, unfortunately, we're not able to be on a real road track for racing. I mean, how seriously are these men and women taking this Zwift racing? I mean, we are talking about these huge numbers, these huge wattages, how great this racing is. Are they taking this just as seriously as they would for a national road race?
Oh, for sure. I think some of these riders too, they actually are in indoor cycling racing teams as well. Vicky Whitelaw, for example, she doesn't race that much on the road. So this is quite serious for her. And that's why she also does so well. She's a level 50 Zwifter, so she knows Zwifter very well. But I think with the NRS teams and the fact that we're not being able to race outside at the moment, it's meant that most of these teams are treating this very seriously, and you can see with how they're warming up and how they are announcing their teams each week. They're not putting all that effort behind that if they're not treating it seriously. So it's awesome to see that, and I think it's very cool to be able to watch it.
Yeah.
Rihanna, what has come as no surprise is that the people that aren't finishing up near the front, that aren't winning these races, are saying it's not real racing. This doesn't matter.
Of course. But
the ones who are finishing up the front
are holding the trophies high.
Exactly.
Of course.
Yep, that's exactly right. We just saw the image
what
of
a
the jersey
brilliant
for
way to be
Unistaminate up the
able
front.
to. Yeah, and what a brilliant way though, when you have this situation we currently have, that Zwift is a platform that is probably the most realistic platform in terms of virtual racing, that you've got this to be able to showcase, road racing, that is as realistic as it possibly comes.
It's become a little bit like Kleenex or hoovering. People don't ask for a tissue, they ask for a Kleenex. You don't vacuum your carpet anymore, you hoover it. And people go Zwifting as opposed to riding indoors. It's become that dominant brand in terms of indoor riding.
Yes.
I think the biggest strength of it, from me personally, has been the ability to ride with friends. And I just wish
Yep.
before the coronavirus struck that I invested in a few products that start with Z. Because last Saturday I did a 2-hour ride on Zwift on one screen, and I had Zoom on another screen, and I did a 2-hour bike ride with 8 guys that I've
Yeah.
ridden with for about 20 years. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal, and you can race and ride with people from all over the world, people that you may not see for 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is, and people like myself, who's a total amateur, who just enjoys it as a hobby, but can ride with friends or people that are professionals because they just happen to be on Zwift at the same time as you, which is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, it's really cool. I've been doing a ride each Friday that's been organised by Graham Brown in Perth. He has Anna Mears in Adelaide as part of the ride. I'm in Melbourne
Yeah.
as part of the ride. He's had Greg Henderson over in New Zealand participate. And again, there's the Zoom element as well. And we all have a chat. Gracie Alvin's been on it in Canberra. So we've got most states and territories in Australia covered, plus New Zealand as well. And it has been fantastic.
Yeah.
It's one of the few
Very
times
cool.
I can keep up with Anna Mears and Greg Henderson.
I did see her jump on a couple of times when I was on, and I thought, now it's time for me to get off.
That's when
Probably
you
a
don't
good
want to
time.
go for the sprint jersey.
No, absolutely not.
Brie Wilson up towards the front for the Rock Salt Attacker team. She's a rider that performs pretty well on this platform. She was in 6th position in the first round. Carly, you might just want to recount the story about Anna Mears with her power output for sprint training, and then Martine Barras going across and assessing your power.
Yeah, when I actually jumped in that same ride with you, Matt, the other week, and I heard Anna Mears talking about her sprint power and her coach, and I wanted to jump in, but then I wanted to keep some of my dignity, so I'm just going to say it now on the stream. But Martin Barras was her coach, and then he went from the track sprint to the endurance road. And I remember the first camp that he had us on, and we had to do a power profile test, and that included the FTP, our VO2, and also a sprint. And he got all our numbers, and he was looking at it, and this included Peter Mullins as well. She was part of the team, and he asked the staff, and he's like, sorry, but I think there's a number missing. There has to be a 0 at the end of this. So he thought, or a 1 in front of it. So pretty much our numbers were that low that he wasn't used to not seeing it in the thousands, and thought that there had been a typo, but in actual fact, it was just our max power.
It wasn't a typo,
Anna,
it was
for
a
making
Lego.
us look bad.
Oh, goodness.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Tommy Ingers just mentioned that he rode last night with Mark Cavendish online, courtesy of Zwift. So that is just fantastic.
Yeah, that's
We're
cool.
seeing one of the riders
very cool.
at the back of this group. Anya Lowe is towards the back of this group. She rides for ARA Sunshine Coast. She's from Tasmania, but she rides from the team that is based out of the Sunshine Coast. And she's a big prospect on both the track and on the road. She's in that group that's amongst the endurance athletes on the track. She's got a big future on the road as well. I've had the pleasure of watching her come up through the under-19s, going head-to-head with Sarah Gigante, and she's steadily making her progress. There's Race with me, Emily Watts, always up near the front, Emily Watts. She had a nasty crash a year or so ago. She's put that behind her, and she's shown that she's got pretty good form throughout this part of the season. And this format suits the power of Emily Watts. watts. I like the way she's going about it, up towards the front. 22 kilometres down, around about 15 Ks to go, Carly.
Yeah, Emily, she used Zwift a lot to come back from that injury, and was really strong at the national championships in Ballarat at the start of this year. So I think today, she having done so well last week as well, it will be another good one for her. And yeah, another really young up-and-comer that has been showing a lot of potential. So it would be really interesting to see how she goes towards this finish. We see Matilda Reynolds, clearly she's wanting to go for that sprint jersey. With that green sprint jersey next to her name means that she's got the virtual jersey in game. So always one to go for that jersey in real life, and good to see that motivation has happened in Zwift as well.
Yeah, the third place finish that she got on the opening stage at the Tour Down Under this year, it was a sprint stage. It was won by Chloe Hosking, and then it was the Finnish national champion, Lotta, a married name just escapes me at the moment, that was in second position, and it was Matilda Reynolds that then finished in third place. But it was a super performance by Matilda Reynolds, and the one thing that she probably did at that Tour Down Under was actually underestimate how good she is against some of the best in the world. And hopefully that third place finish has given her the confidence to know that she can step up, she can go head to head with anybody in the world. And it'll be fascinating to see what happens come 2021, assuming that we're back out racing on the road and she gets a chance again at the Tour Down Under. I think she's capable of winning a stage there.
Yeah, for sure. I think she also works full time at Specialized, and how she juggles that, as well as how quickly she's come through that cycling ranks. She's probably normally was always concentrating on criteriums, but then we saw her at Nationals do such a strong race for the Specialized Women's Racing with her teammate Jamie Gunning leading her out. So her teammate won the under 23, and she still got top 10 as well. So definitely 2021 and the end of this year would be great to see her right up there and standing on some podiums again.
And for you, Rihanna, this was going to be the year of the Ironman. It looks like that's been postponed to 2021.
Well, yeah, it was. That was my big goal this year. I've ticked off a couple of half Ironman triathlon events, which, you know, that was huge for me. I'm certainly very much an amateur when it comes to these types of events. And yeah, this year the big goal was to do the Ironman. I actually had entered and I'd started the training program. And obviously, unfortunately, with the coronavirus, all those events have been cancelled. So that's on the back burner now. I haven't really sort of marked another one in yet. So yeah, I'm sort of just sitting and waiting and seeing what happens. I mean, given that the Supercars calendar is also yet to be unveiled for the rest of this year, and what happens next year, we'll just have to sit back and reassess and then maybe go again next year. Not sure.
Have you struggled for motivation to get out and keep training and just general exercise, or has that been part of what's kept you sane? It certainly helped keep me sane.
Yeah, it actually has. I obviously went pretty hard at the start of the year because I was obviously in training for the Ironman, and that was full on. And then as soon as it got cancelled, I sort of obviously backed everything off, just to regular training. But I thought, no, I want to keep ticking over, just in case, I did enter, something at the end of the year. I wanted to have just a base bit of training behind me, just so I could just jump into something if something came up. And to be honest, it has kept me sane. I just wanted to keep my head in a good headspace. And I know, exercise is a passion for me regardless. So I've found it a bit of an outlet during this tough time. And obviously without Supercars and having to travel, I've just made the most of it. So we're fortunate. We've got a really good setup at home. We've got our Zwift, we've got a treadmill, we've got all those sorts of things. So that's been pretty good during this lockdown period, just to be able to have that, in the lounge room type thing. So yeah, that's definitely kept my head in a good space during this pretty stressful time.
And Carly, we've seen evidence that she's got a really good coffee machine as well.
Yeah, every time
Yes,
we've
well-
seen her, she's had a good coffee.
When you're not riding on the road to the coffee shop, you need to have a good coffee machine after the Zwift ride. You know, it's all part of the role. You know.
Yeah. Andrew has just asked the question on the Zwift Community Live. How many kilometres covered before the final climb starts? And by my calculations, Carly, the last climb will start with around about 35.5 Ks to go.
Yeah, that's correct. That's where the hilltop finish starts. And yeah, obviously that finishes at the top of the KOM banner. So 1.4 kilometres with pinches of up to 17%. It's quite a hard finish. I know every time I end up finishing on that part, you feel like you're not even moving. Well, maybe that's me. But yeah, it's quite a difficult circuit, and we're just seeing the riders now. It has that front group has split up a little bit and reduced in size, with only about 10 kilometres left now. So going to be interesting.
So,
I do
Carly,
love a hilltop finish.
Who do you think we're going to be looking at for this sort of last section of the race? I mean, who are your favourites for that real pinch towards the end?
I highlighted 3 riders that I thought would be right up there. Obviously, Vicky Whitelaw, you can't go past, having so much experience on Zwift and also winning in race 1 of the NRS. But I also think Brie Wilson, she won the series last year, and when she got 6 in race 1 and it was more of a sprinters type circuit, I think that just shows what good form she's in at the moment. And then the other one that I really thought would do well as well is her teammate Justine Barrow, and she was again in that top 10 in race 1 and is more renowned for her hill climbing and is one of Australia's strongest hill climbers. So to have a hilltop finish for her today is definitely something that would suit her down to a T. And we saw that at Nationals as well. She got second in Ballarat in January and started the year off really strong. So I definitely think Rock Salt Attacker are going to have a very strong team coming into the finish and have that ability to almost 1-2 some of these other teams and have some riders that will be able to pull off a win as well.
We always talk about power to weight when it comes to the mountains, and you mentioned Brie Wilson. Of the riders in the top 10 on round 1, she was the lightest. She weighs in at just 52 kilograms, and the next lightest was Brie Hargrave at 56 kilos. So Brie Wilson is a lot lighter than everybody else from the top 10 from round 1. But this race, as we've 28 Ks covered of the 37.1, we're inside the last 10 kilometres. The hammer has been put down because the peloton is splintering. The pressure is really on.
Yeah, and it looks like doing a lot of the damage. You can see Justine Barrow is right up the front there, and also Taryn Heather. Taryn Heather was another one that she got second last year in the SRAM Send It series overall, and is a strong hill climber and also time trialist. And another name, Georgia Whitehouse and Vicky Whitelaw. So all names that we've been talking about today and now starting to put the pressure down when we're getting into that final pointing part of the race.
And look at the numbers. Taryn Heather punching out momentarily there. 6 watts per kilo. They are huge numbers, Taryn Heather. At the front, really starting to apply the pressure. Tactically, it's pretty early to be putting this much power down, but it is the opportunity to try and break it up a little bit more. And you can see this group is getting strung out. And we've spoken about real world versus the Zwift world. Well, this is real pain, regardless of where it is. And these are real heart rates, and this is real lactic acid that's building up in the system.
Yeah, and in the real world, we see Kate Perry always on the front doing a team role, putting the pain down before the climb, and we're seeing her doing it again today in Zwift. She's the one that's causing this like the Peloton to be reducing in size so much at the moment. And yeah, it's awesome seeing her doing the same thing in Zwift.
This is pretty cool, getting right there in the middle of the peloton and having the avatars go straight through the camera. And this group has gotten really small really quickly. The pressure is on. Brie Vine, here she is. She looks really composed. This looks just like the setup when it's all happening comfortably. But surely she's got to be pretty close towards the red zone. Heart rate's up around the 180 beats per minute mark. She's got the kid on there for
she
the
looks very comfortable sitting there in her lounge room. Very, very comfortable. Yes, too comfortable for my liking, considering where they're
just
sitting
like she's got a fair bit of room.
Kilometers. Yep.
Yeah, she looks really good. She looks like she's got plenty of room to go a lot deeper than what she currently is. She was eighth in round 1, Brie Vine.
And about 5 kilometers left. I was just going to say they've got about 5 kilometers left until they do hit that base of the climb. So still plenty of time to try to save that energy a bit, but it has reduced a lot now. So I think like this is where teammates will be trying to do their damage to make that group as small as possible to help their teammates or their leaders to get to the front as fresh as possible and to not have such a big peloton to have to verse either.
Yeah, good to see that Jenny Pettinen is also up towards the front. She's in one of the neighbouring suburbs from my place. She's a mum of a couple of kids as well, and she's juggling life as a mum, working commitments, training as well. A lot of her training is done, thankfully, indoors, so I won't bump into her on the road and be embarrassed by how well she's climbing at the moment and get blown away, because she is motoring and riding really strongly up towards the front. Good to see her in the thick of the action. On board as well with Nicole Frayne, who we've spoken about as one of the big contenders for today's stage or today's race, round 2 of the National Road Series. And she was the 3rd place finisher in the opening round that was dominated by Sydney Uni Staminade, where they finished 1st, 2nd and 3rd. The current standings in the series, it's Vicky Whitelaw who leads ahead of her teammate Georgia Whitehouse, and then another teammate, Nicole Frayne, is in 3rd position, followed then by Brie Hargrave, the youngster Tess White in 5th position, Brie Wilson 6th, Race With Me, Emily Watts in 7th, Brie Vine, who we've seen some footage of, looking reasonably comfortable at this stage, in 8th position, Taryn Heather 9th, and Justine Barrow in 10th place. I think Justine will really like the course, the finish of this round in New York. Not many left at the front of the race, Carly.
No, we're just on board with Chloe Moran, another South Australian up-and-comer. And, yeah, it's awesome to see Sassy putting a team here and having so many of the youngsters getting involved in this racing and doing quite well as well. And a lot of the trackies as well, which I'm a bit surprised about, but good to see them up there.
It's a good thing. They've got it's all horsepower. It's good to see, particularly seeing a few youngsters that are still up here in contention. Maeve Plouffe still in this group. She's riding really strongly.
Yeah, Maeve was another rider that was recently selected for the Olympics, which would now be for next year, but a really strong rider as part of the track endurance squad. So this type of effort, that couple-minute effort, would be down her alley. It would just be if the power to weight and that hill, how much that affects things as well. But definitely those short, sharp, couple-minute efforts is something that would be one of Maeve's strengths, and no surprise that she's still here so far.
She's part of the ARA Sunshine Coast team. And this climb at 5%, it is starting to thin the group out once again. And you can see at the back of the group, and this is one thing you and I can both relate to, Rihanna, probably more so than even Carly can relate to. As soon as that little gap opens up and you can see on the computer screen, it says close the gap.
Dropped.
And you scream at it. Yeah, it says close gap.
Yes.
And you say, I'm trying.
I'm trying. I realize I need to close this gap. I'm trying, and it's not working. But this is where we're really going to start to see. This is when these girls are going to have to work hard. The Peloton's just starting to come apart a little bit more now, and we're going to start to see some serious numbers here, and these girls get to the front. We're just on 32.4 kilometers now. We're starting to get to the real juicy end of this race.
We're getting down
Yeah, and
towards
we
the
just
the
saw
steep
on
part
this
of the
little
climb.
rise. Yeah, we're not actually on the climb yet, but we just saw a lot of the riders, a few lightweight power-ups being dropped. And I think if you're dropping your lightweight now, it's not a good sign of how you think you might finish when you actually have to get to the climb. So a few of those riders that might be suffering just hanging in there are using that little bit of a boost. But it's definitely now, with less than 5K to go, coming into that pointy end where those hill climbers are going to be licking their lips.
Yeah, if you're using that power up now, that is a desperation survival tactic. You want to save that until a little bit later on, surely.
Yeah, for sure.
Over the crest, it's starting to descend now, and an opportunity for a little bit of recuperation. But you don't get that same drafting effect on Zwift as you do in the real world when you do go over the top of the climb. So the recovery isn't as good before they hit the next descent and that final pinch up towards the finish line, which you've mentioned a few times now, Carly. 1.4 kilometers in length with gradients as steep as 17%. This will be brutal.
Yeah, and you can see they're going downhill, but the power's still on. Sam there is holding 4.9 watts per kilo. So they're not easing off on the pedals, even if their pace is going a little bit higher. And definitely there's not much recovery in these rolling sections of this course. So those riders that are more up near the front at the moment are probably actually getting a little bit more because they could use a couple of seconds to cruise and making the most of that. But yeah, there's no recovery now.
Yeah, at this point, it is survival on board with Georgia Whitehouse. And you can see the numbers. They're up around the 4 watts per kilo mark regularly. There's no letting up on the pedals as we're down to the last 3 kilometers. It flattens out at this point before they make their way onto the final climb. And there's not many left in this group at all. Maybe 15 riders left in this group, perhaps less.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think it's really down to around those 15 riders, as Taryn Heather again is right up near the front, and Bree Wilson too doing a lot of damage. So these are riders that we thought would be quite active and animated towards the end, and those favourites are definitely starting to move up and show their cards a little bit now. We're about to hit the base with less than a K to go.
This is Taryn Heather. Now we're on board with her. She's one of the riders that you spoke about earlier on as one of the favourites to win, so you'll be pretty happy to see her right near the front.
Yeah, I think she would do really well today, and I've raced a bit against her, and it's just awesome seeing her still involved in the sport and able to dish out a lot of pain still in races and in Zwift. So I tend to avoid the races she's doing so I don't get that dish out of pain. But yeah, great seeing her right up there.
And riding at 300 watts with a heart rate approaching 180 beats per minute. So she's got a little bit of room still to go, but it's getting desperately close to the red zone. We've seen a few heart rates up around the 190 mark so far throughout this race. Group still tapping along. They're just about to hit the climb. They can't be too far away from making their way onto the base of the climb. You know the course better than we do, Carly.
Yeah, I think this kilometre is definitely coming up soon. I'm trying to work it out myself, but normally at this mark, I'm already in the box that I'm just looking at the avatars in front of me. But they'll be coming up to the corner now, which will be indicating the base of the climb. So not long to go before these riders hit that finishing wall.
Rihanna, in your role at the Supercars, when you're in the pits, you're ready to interview somebody after a race, and you've looked and assessed that hasn't been the outcome that they've been looking for. Are you anxious in preparation of trying to find that right question to ask at this point when they're so close to the finish?
Yeah, I mean, it's just all part of the emotion of live sport, isn't it? You get the good, the bad, and the definitely ugly, and it's all part of it. It's what we love and why we do it, isn't it? So they think they've just hit the climb now, haven't they, Carly? So I think this is where we're gonna separate who wants this more than anyone else, who's got something left to give. Yeah, we're at 13% now, and we're going to really see the girls who have got a little bit left in the tank finish off this last part of this race, as we're watching Nicole Fran at the moment pushing out 6.2 watts per kilo. There's some serious numbers. Carly, I don't even want to think about what they must be feeling right now.
Yeah,
It's a huge effort. They've made the most of that steep pinch. Go for it, Carly.
Yeah. I was just going to say Sydney Uni Staminade in those pink jerseys, they're really well represented in that group of 5. And also Justine Barrow and Georgia Whitehouse is still there too, which is really impressive. But Justine Barrow now making her move at 7.5 watts per kilo. She's attacked them and she's got a really good gap. There's a couple of seconds now. And we saw her, Matt, racing at the National Championships in Ballarat. Very impressive with the breakaway with Amanda Spratt, and now just showing that strength again here in Zwift on this climb today.
This is an awesome performance. She's a full-time physiotherapist. She's I think she's 40 or 41 years of age, and she's at the front punching out 300 watts, riding at 183 beats per minute. The silver medalist from the National Championships this year around Mount Buninyong. This is the course that she really would have been looking forward to. She's opened up a small gap, but they're starting to close back in on her. And it is one of the pre-race favourites, again, Bree Wilson, who's shown herself up towards the front. The gap is at around about 2 or 3 seconds at this point.
Yeah, and Bree Wilson is one of her teammates in Rock Salt Attacker as well. And she's got a bit of a gap on Emma Chilton, which is another Rock Salt Attacker. So race 1, we had Sydney Uni Staminade dominating the top 3. And it looks like today we're having Rock Salt Attacker showing their strength, dominating the top 3 at the moment.
So Justine
Barrow
at the front.
If they can hold it off.
Bree Wilson in second position, Emma Chilton in third place. So looking for a clean sweep once again. Georgia Whitehouse it is next in line, followed then by Nicole Frayne. Bree Hargraves is also up towards the front, as is Vicky Whitelaw. The arch is just approaching as Justine Barrow has pretty much got this wrapped up. This has been a huge performance by Justine Barrow.
Yeah, she's dropping that draft boost now that she got, which probably isn't helping her much considering she's solo and no one to draft off, but she's just taking out the win there, it looks like, with Emma Chilton in second and Bree Wilson third.
And Georgia Whitehouse
fourth.
Awesome. Nicole Frayne just about to come across the line. Is this Vicky Whitelaw that is closing in for important points for the series? Vicky Whitelaw just goes across the line. So they're important points for the series overall. Hargrave with another strong performance inside the top 10. Taryn Heather not too far away. Jenny Penttinen in amongst the results, close to a top 10 finish as well. But no big surprises there, Carly, about the victory going to Justine Barrow. She was one of the pre-race favourites. She's delivered. Emma Chilton in second position. Bree Wilson in third place. Georgia Whitehouse, it was in fourth, followed then by Nicole Frayne in fifth. Vicky Whitelaw in sixth. Eloise Sandow in seventh. Bree Hargrave in eighth. Bree Vine in ninth position. Chelsea Holmes in 10th place. Well, great day of racing, Carly. The result, as expected?
Yeah, I would have thought maybe Vicky Whitelaw might have been up there a little bit, but definitely those three riders that we had shouted out during the stage then did quite well, and no surprises on that podium, but a really awesome race by Rock Salt Attacker.
And Rihanna, inspired to get back out on the Zwift. I mean, you're on there just about every day anyway. But I watch these races or commentate on these races, and it gives me itchy feet to get into the garage.
Oh, 100%. I mean, these girls, they're super, super impressive. I mean, just watching that last little climb, I've done that climb a couple of times myself. I mean, it's just what they're punching out nearly 8 watts per kilo at the end of a, nearly 40-kilometer race. Dip your hat to those girls. Super impressive. Awesome.
Huge effort. So we've got another 2 weeks before the next one. But let's not forget, Carly, each Tuesday we've got the SRAM Send It series where a lot of these women will be racing again.
Yeah, every Tuesday night they've been racing, and a lot of these ladies have been doing that in between the NRS. So having some pretty hard hit outs during the week for their training, and probably actually helping them prepare for these NRS races a little bit more. And yeah, it's been awesome seeing so many women racing. On Tuesday, we had about 200 participate in the SRAM Send It series. So it's been awesome to see that number just increasing and our women's community growing, and also seeing the best of Australian women's cycling taking part every fortnight on Zwift.
Well, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, the men are warming up. They're just about ready to go. So they're into the pens early. To both of you, thanks for joining me on the coverage today.
Thanks, Matt.
That was awesome working with you guys.
We're going to take a short break, and then Pat Shaw will be joining me for coverage of the men's race. And we'll pick it up once again in 2 weeks for more coverage of the Women's National Road Series. Bye for now. Hello and welcome to round 2 of the National Road Series on Zwift. Matthew Kennan joined by Pat Shaw, who's been a multiple winner of the National Road Series in the real world, which is currently being led in the real world by Brendan Johnson of the CCS Canberra team. And in the Zwift world, it's been led by Graham Frisley, who, Pat, in week 1 was brilliant with his first ever National Road Series win.
Yes, he put himself well on display, and it was a perfect timed use of the draft power up. And Nick White, he launched at the right time, but with the use of the draft power up, Frisley was able to get into the draft stream of Nick and just be on his hip, and he launched his power up and he won quite convincingly. Nick White sat up a little bit from the finish, Matt. He didn't get pipped for second, so he still ran second. That could have been costly for him, particularly on a day like today's course, which you'll get to describing in a moment. But it definitely suits Nick White far better than it suits Graham Frisley.
Well, we've just seen in the women's race across this New York course, it's 37.1 kilometres, the final 1.5 Ks. It's a brutal climb up to the finish line. We saw Vicky Whitelaw, the winner of the opening round. She did finish inside the top 10, but it was a different shape at the front of the race. Justine Barrow taking out the win, a vastly different style of rider, a pure climber. Graham Frisley is more a guy who's a brilliant track endurance rider. He's good in the criteriums. He's good in lumpy road races. This will really test him. They're in the starting pen. They've got 2 minutes before they start. Graham Frisley, the winner of the opening round, ahead of Nick White. The ever-consistent Jay Vine. We'll talk about him in a moment, Pat. I know you consider him one of the big favourites for today. And Pat Eddy, one of the young rising stars of Australian cycling, 4th place, round 1, a big chance today. Harley Moore was in 5th position. Will Golding was 6th in round 1. The ever-consistent Cam Roberts was in 7th place. Ben Van Dam was in 8th. Ben Hill, Mr. Aggressive, was 9th. And then rounding out the top 10 in round 1 of the National Road Series on Zwift was Alistair Donahue. We've seen Brevine perform pretty well in the women's race. Jay Vine was in 3rd place in round 1. And Pat Shaw, this course certainly suits him. We'll get your thoughts on him in just a moment. We have 1 minute and 15 seconds to start for the men. This is 37.1 kilometres. Same course as we saw in the women's race. When they get to the 1.5 kilometre to go mark, it hits a pinch of some 17%. It then plateaus ever so slightly before the grind up through to the finish line. And we saw in the women's race, it was Justine Barrett. She made the most of the early going when they were on that climb. She opened up a gap and then she was able to hold that on all the way through to the finish. Good to see D. Kennett, that is Dylan Kennett. He rides for the St. George Continental Cycling Team. He was a brilliant winner at the end of last season in China at the Tour of Taihu Lake, a race in which he performed well in also in 2018. Plenty of riders on the start line, making sure that they've got their engines ticking over and ready to roll when the gun drops. We're down to the final few seconds before they get underway.
Here's Jay Vine.
Here is Jay Vine.
On.
He's got 2 towels. He's ready to sweat this up, Pat, and he's one of the favourites for this race. The clock has just clicked 0. They make their start, and Jay Vine is accelerating early. And, Pat, this is important to make sure he stays up towards the front.
Yes, you'll see his tempo changed ever so slightly there about 4 seconds into the race. So it's about now he's just backed it off a little bit, now onto tempo. But raising that power up high as they are released from the pen is integral to good positioning immediately in the race. Once you're in that front 20, you're really cozy. You can pick and choose whether you move up a couple of spots, move back a couple of spots, and that's up to you at that point. But before that, as we see Brie in the background, she's got the cooling vest on, I think. It's important to have that good positioning early, because if you don't get that good positioning early, Matt, you're on the back foot. And particularly on today's course, Jay Vine's going to be one of the favourites. Certainly riders to watch for mine today. Jay Vine, I would like to keep an eye on Pat Eddy. He had a great performance in round 1 on a flat course, but he rides really well around the Buninyong Nationals course, so potentially has the ability to produce something today. The likes of Ben Hill, he's obviously going to be up there. Cam Roberts will be up there as well. And a rider that we always expect to perform quite well in a hilly race, obviously the man we're watching at home today, Jay Vine. So they'll be the riders we watch. I've got a few sneakies to talk about as the race goes on, but I'm glad that you brought up Dylan Kennett because he's one of the great young up-and-coming riders in this area of the world. So great to see some of the sprinters also turning up for this difficult race today.
Yeah, he's got a really good sprint, and in the coverage where I've seen him, it's mainly been in China. He's been able to beat a lot of guys that have been winning at World Tour level, and I'm of the view that Dylan Kennett has got the ability to go to that next step. It's a challenging time for any rider, really, that's in that 24 years of age bracket, and somebody that's pretty close to you, Nick White, is in that area where this is the age where they would have been hoping that this would be a year where they can have a big impact and catch the attention of some big teams. So perhaps there's going to be a few guys that find their career through no fault of their own as a result of the coronavirus is delayed, is just put on the back foot by one season. And let's hope that they're able to pick it back up where it left off in 2021 in the real world, and they're making the most of it here online on Zwift.
Well, I think even pre-coronavirus over the last, 30 years, particularly in a place like Australia where we're quite a long way from Europe, we've seen riders that have missed that opportunity, albeit for other reasons rather than their ability. And I think it is what you make of it. I think a great part of it is we've seen such an exceptional uptake of Zwift racing, which still allows teams, managers, and riders in particular to build their results base, but also their power and their numbers. So to keep showing that they can continually produce a certain amount of watts per kilo for a period of time, whether that be 5, 10, 15, 20 or 40 minutes, which is still credible data to use, whether it be on a home trainer or whether it be outdoors. And at some point towards the end of this season, these riders will get an opportunity. Now, when they go to the team camps or they go to the team representatives which are interested in them, then they'll have to produce those numbers in real life in front of the testers in their protocols. So whether it be in their testing labs or whether it be out the road at one of their training facilities. So they're going to still get opportunities, Matt, and it's what they make of those. At the end of the day, at the end of your career, you just sit back and you probably think to yourself, did I give myself the best opportunity to make the most of the sport? And if you have, then I don't think you're going to be disappointed at all. However, if you sit back and think, well, I cut a few corners and I've missed out, well, then it's only one person to blame, and that's the athlete themselves. So I think at the end of all this, regardless of the setbacks, I think there's still, because of the virtual racing aspect, it's given every athlete equal opportunity to prolong their career.
We're on board now with Jesse Fenton-B, and he's been a really nice story over the last couple of years, and seeing him ride particularly the Jayco Herald Sun Tour, and that's given the Herald Sun, the newspaper, the name behind that race, the opportunity to use some old photos when his dad was riding the Herald Sun Tour, and Jesse was just a little kid, 2, 3, 4 years of age, and getting photos with his father at the start line or the finish line of the Sun Tour, as it was probably known when his dad was riding that race. I've really enjoyed seeing some of those images of Jesse and his father together.
Oh, yes. It's a great thing about the Herald Sun Tour in particular. I was able to do a piece this year talking about what the Herald Sun Tour meant to me personally. I was able to race 10 of them, but my father won stages in them and raced against the formidable John Trevorrow, who's, goes down as the most impressive rider to race the tour over the history of it. So there's that really good linkage between domestic cyclists and also their pedigree, or also the history of their families through the sport. So it's great to see Jesse Fenton-B out there ripping it up again. His team did really well in the first stage, albeit they missed out on the points, Matt. They were 11th and 12th with Liam White, should I say, and Aidan Sinclair. Aidan Sinclair is just a young rider. He's a junior 19 rider, but he does perform really well on Zwift. And being very light in weight, today will be a good chance for him to put himself in that top 10. Last round, should I say, a fortnight ago, was more based on a pure power athlete who can produce the most watts total and that's why we saw Frizzly and White come to the front, which we'd expect. But today it'll be more a watts per kilo athlete that does really well. So we look for those Jay Vines, but also Aidan Sinclair. Maybe this is an opportunity for him, and also for other young riders in the peloton today, like Pat Eddy, or even a young fellow that I look after, Jesse Norton. It's a good opportunity for them to put themselves to the front and compare themselves with these more mature athletes.
Michael Freeberg is one of those mature athletes. He's a guy who's been a world champion on the track in the Omnium. He's represented Australia at the Commonwealth Games as well. National road champion around Buninyong when he'd been dropped on the final lap, fought his way back, and he managed to win that national title. It was one of the heartwarming national championships. We've had a few up there at Mount Buninyong, but that victory by Michael Freeberg was really one of the best we've ever seen.
Oh, yes, it kept us on the edge of our seats the whole time. And, as the two riders in front toyed with one another, Freeberg saw it as an opportunity, but didn't he need the heart of a lion on that day? Just saw in there Tyler Lindorf, Matt, and as Brendan Johnson pops up, the National Road Series in real life leader, 31 level on Zwift. He won the Melbourne Warrnambool early in the year. Remember, he podiumed last year as well, and he was really happy to take the win. It was a big win. But he performs brilliantly on Zwift across the board. Doesn't matter whether it's flat or hilly. However, today will be one that suits him more. But Tyler Lindorf, he's another rider that I said we'd talk about a few smokies throughout the day. What a brilliant upcoming young talent in Australian cycling. And he had a chance to show what he had through the summer in even the World Tour races, particularly Tour Down Under. Unfortunately, he had a couple of falls and he continues to have these setbacks at poor times. But this kid has an incredible amount of talent and he's got a great head on his shoulders too. He reads a bike race well, albeit that's not so important in a virtual sense, but in real life racing, he does read the race well. I see him being a great leader in the future. Remembering also, if you're trying to identify teams, they all wear individual jerseys, so each team has a group of jerseys, and as they pop up on our screen now, this will give you a better ability to work out who's where in the peloton while watching.
And the team that you can see in the bottom right corner, that is Team CCS Canberra. That is the team of Brendan Johnson. And the team and Brendan, they're the leaders of the In Real Life National Road Series, courtesy of Trekkie's victory in the Melbourne to Warrnambool, and possibly one of the most iconic jerseys in cycling. The Z team, famously the team where Greg LeMond won the Tour de France for the third time in his career back in 1990.
Yes, and we love our retro jerseys. There's something about cycling. Retro stuff never goes out of fashion. It holds its cloth well. We see in there now, we are watching Tyler Lindorf, one of the riders I just mentioned, and I think he is definitely one to watch towards the end of today's race. It was a great women's race, Matt, but it probably expected result in fairness.
It was a race where the attrition was coming from the back of the peloton. You saw riders continually getting dropped off the back, but as soon as they hit the base of the climb, Justine Barrow just opened up the throttle. And what we saw, that we also saw in the opening round, was that it was a clean sweep of the podium. But in the opening round, it was the Sydney Uni Staminate team that got first, second and third. This time, it was rock salt attacker Justine Barrow taking the win, her teammate Emma Chilton in second position, and then Brie Wilson in third place. And I had Brie Wilson as my pre-race favourite based on her performance in the opening round and her ability on Zwift. I thought that might have just suited her ever so slightly better. But Justine Barrow, the silver medalist from the national championships this year in Buninyong, she got the biscuit. It is Joe Cooper, one of your former teammates, former Kiwi national champion, now showing himself at the front, applying some pressure early, Pat. There's some 28 kilometres still to race.
Well, for Joe to be involved today, it needs to be this type of race. It needs to be an aggressive race and a hard race because of the shortness of the final climb. We know that it is difficult. We saw the women's race earlier break up, but the men will complete that 1.4, 1.5 kilometres at about an average of 30 kilometres an hour, taking about 3 minutes, Matt. So although there is that really steep pinch at 17%, there is also that plateau, and these riders will hit really nice speeds along there, and that's where we'll really spread out. We saw in the ladies' event that it was the injection of power on the 17% that created the gaps, but it was then the plateau where the real groundwork was laid for victory. So I suspect to see the same thing in the men's race, and many of these men have raced this course before. We look at Nick White at the moment, obviously from Team Bridge Lane, winner of the National Road Series last year, won the 2018 Zwift Criterium Championship as well, and was part of the Zwift Academy in its first year. So he's got plenty of Zwift experience, but he also is using this to remind people when the doors get opened back up and the racing's back on, he's ready to go full hammer and tongs. So it's great to see such a good turnout from all the teams. I did see Sam Jenner in there as well. Yes, he's in about 14th position. Another rider who will like this course today, Brendan Davids from Oliver's Real Foods. He's another rider, much like Joe Cooper, probably needs this to be a harder race on the flatter section of this course.
Yeah, it's amazing. A guy like Nick White, he is so close to being able to take that next step up, and the sort of numbers that he's able to punch out. Hopefully that does catch the attention of some of the big teams. Sam Jenner, who you just mentioned, former Australian under-23 national champion. He won that title. I think it was his first year out of the under-19s when he won that title around Buninyong, and he's still just finding his feet as he continues to develop through the under-23s into the elite ranks. Still on board with Nick White at this point. The group, though, Pat, is already starting to thin out from the back, but Nick White and Brendan Johnson are always pretty close to each other up towards the front, and they're two of the pre-race favourites for sure.
Oh, yes, certainly. But I wouldn't be surprised to just see someone jump out of the pack today because, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking for a watts per kilo rider, and often young riders in particular can actually produce a really good watts per kilo, particularly if they're a lightweight rider, a climber-specific rider. And because there's no wind to affect them on the flatter side of the course, it's not like they can get dropped in the crosswinds or be worried about not getting a draft. As long as they're sitting in the pack there, and then they can release themselves in that final 3 minutes of the race. It's going to be 3 minutes at around 110% of their threshold. And that's really possible for these lightweight riders. Someone around that sort of 58 to 65 kilos could be someone to be a surprise. Maybe Reece Tucknott. I've seen him perform really well around the Nationals course in Buninyong, and he's also really surprised me with his development recently. So he's one. Tasman Nankervis, a mountain biker. You know him well. He's another rider that can really surprise today's.
Yeah, the mountain bikers with their explosive nature, the explosivity of a mountain bike race is full gas punching up those climbs. I think the course today really does suit them. You and I got the chance to commentate on Tuesday night for the SRAM Send It series, and that's the first of 8 rounds every Tuesday. Make sure you get on board and try and participate in that one so you can measure yourself up against some of these athletes. I had the chance to talk with Greg Henderson yesterday, and he revealed some of his numbers. Through that 19 kilometres, he averaged 400 watts for the 19 Ks, and he said for about the first minute or so, he was punching out somewhere in the vicinity of 800 watts just to get himself up towards the fronts.
Yes, and for probably our younger athletes, that's where it's difficult to recover, is that first couple of minutes. They use that real strong surge of power, and it really fatigues their legs because they don't have those kilometres and endurance capacity there to handle that amount of energy exertion and then recover. And that's why we always look, it's right, perfect timing actually, 15 minutes in, even the younger riders that aren't as developed yet, if they've made it to the 15-minute mark, generally you'd suspect they've got the good legs to stay here today. It'll all come down to that final sort of 3 minutes of the race. So this is good outlook for the race today, Matt, because we've got a lot of riders still here. Although the Peloton is strung out a little bit, 15 minutes in, look, Jay Vine looks like he's just doing a nice little recovery ride there.
He's making it look pretty comfortable. He's sitting there up towards the front. He's looking reasonably good. He's got the headphones on. He's a picture of concentration. He was third in the opening round. He won round one of the Shram Send It series. Things are looking pretty good for Jay Vine. He's one of the masters of this platform. He knows how to race tactically on Zwift. And we saw him climb really well up to Falls Creek and also up Mount Buller at the Jayco Herald Sun Tour this year.
Oh, certainly. And that's where I'm talking about this watts per kilo. He really jumped to attention on that stage. And I think that he really put himself in the forefront of some of the World Tour teams and definitely pro-continental teams in Europe, as did young Seb Barrett. His effort was a phenomenal ride as well in that exact same stage and throughout the 2020 Herald Sun Tour. But we're looking here still around about 70 riders in this group, Matt, and that's more riders than made it to the 20-minute mark, obviously, of last round, meaning this is going to be an interesting finish. 14 kilometres in. It's a 37-kilometre race, and probably not a bad time to have a look at the aero power-ups and other power-ups available. As we see Brendan Davids, as I mentioned, he really needs to... I see a comment there from Guy Karma. Pat Shaw, how do you read? How's the read? Who's hurting? Doesn't look like many people are hurting at the moment, Guy Karma, all the way from WA. But the power-ups, Matt, the power-ups that you'll see released, we can see there an aero power-up towards the front of the Peloton. So that gives you more aerodynamic for 15 seconds. There's also a van that pops up, and it's a draft power-up. It increases the draft effect by 50% for 30 seconds for the rider. There's the burrito breakaway power-up, which makes you undraftable for 10 seconds. The biggest one today, the lightweight power-up. It's a feather. It pops up, a green feather, and that reduces your body weight by 9.5 kilograms. That'll be helpful for some of the heavier riders towards that 17% pinch. And then our final and latest addition to the power-ups available, and that's the invisibility. You'll see that it's a white ghost, makes you invisible to all other riders in the race for 10 seconds. Now, that could be a really handy one towards the end of this race.
We saw a few of the women use the lightweight power-up just to get to the base of the climb. There's a little pinch before they hit the base of the climb at around about 34.5 kilometres having been covered. And a few of them were getting desperate at that point. And you knew that their race was done, given they were using the featherweight power-up before they even hit the real climb. That was always going to be a bad sign for them.
Oh, yes, for certain. And it's about using the power-ups correctly, but also about using them correctly for you. Someone that potentially is very lightweight and already does produce a good watts per kilo might find that the aero power-up is a better assister for them today as a power-up. Someone like maybe Jay Vine, who knows he's going to climb well and probably climb with most of them, or Cameron Ivory, might want that aero power up. So once they get over that 17% pinch, which is short, but it is difficult, could use the aero power up to then form an attack to develop the gap required to win today's stage.
On board with Miles Stewart, it looks like he's going okay. Punching out more than 300 watts. His heart rate is pretty high at 176 beats per minute, but I think he's still got a little bit left in the tank. To answer the question of Guy Kalmer from WA, I think Miles Stewart is looking all right at this point.
Yes, I think most of them are looking pretty good. Graham Frisley, overall leader, he's in there at the moment. We look at him. He won race one, coming off at 19 years of age, and he came off the wheel of Nick White with the aero power-up that we were talking about before, and he timed it to perfection, Matt Kennan, and thankfully for both of us, we actually were talking about him as a prospect for the victory, so he didn't come out of left field completely for us, but I think he was a bit of a surprise packet for the rest of the field. They know that he can sprint, but to take the win really puts a stamp on your credibility, and Graham Frisley's really done that, and it's great to see him and his Subaru Giant team get a great result there. And also they raced very well in the SRAM Senate series that you were speaking of earlier in the stream.
Yeah, good confidence builder for him. Michael Freeberg now from ARA Sunshine Coast, always up towards the front. And I do love the band around the collar on his jersey as the former Australian road champion. He's also been a world champion on the track in the Omnium. He is Mr. Versatile, Michael Freeberg. I keep seeing the name of Reece Tucknott pop up towards the front. He rides for CCS Canberra. He's one of the teammates of Brendan Johnson. We might start dubbing Reece as the apprentice because he's the apprentice for Brendan Johnson on the road, on the dirt, and as an electrician.
Oh, is that right? Yes. Well, I got to say, I did mention him earlier in the stream, and he is a rider that has impressed me across the summer in particular. And I think he's definitely one to keep our eyes on today. He can produce a good watts per kilo, and knowing that little bit of inside information there, Matt Keenan, that gives me further confidence that he can do a great ride today.
Yeah, he will be a factor, I think, towards the back end of this race. So too will Michael Freeberg, riding at the pointy end of the race fairly early on. The name of Pat Eddy's not too far away. Sam Hill is also up towards the front. Joe Cooper, he's been pretty aggressive also. Almost 20 kilometres having been covered. This race, Pat, 37.1 Ks.
Yes, Joe Cooper has been aggressive early. Did you get eyes on him, Matt Ken? Because I did see him drop off earlier, and I'm not sure if he made his way back. And I think he might have. He has. Good.
I saw his name pop up just near Michael Freeberg a moment ago. Zach Gilmore's certainly in there. Good to see the Gilmore name continuing in the sport. We talked about family heritage before with Jesse Fentonby. Zach Gilmore has got some heritage. His dad, Matt Gilmore, world champion for Belgium, mind you, on the track in the Madison, and a silver in the Olympics in that event in Sydney. And his grandfather, Graham Gilmore, one of the greats of six-day racing back in the 60s and the 70s. That's some heritage for Zach Gilmore.
Certainly some pedigree in Zach Gilmore. I don't know if this finish is as good a finish for him today, but it's just another way to continue to develop. Yeah, slowly but surely, Matt, we are seeing this field strip down. There's probably about 55 riders remaining in the group, and certainly some gaps opening up.
Yeah, Zach Gilmore, this won't be a course that really suits him, but the fact that he's still in this group at this point, with the peloton starting to thin out, is a pretty good sign. He's punching out some 370 watts, heart rate up towards the 170 plus area, and the story of Zach Gilmore is already one of great resilience. For those of you that don't know the backstory for Zach himself, he's already overcome a battle with cancer that he was battling in his latter years of high school. So he's dealt with some adversity in his life, and he's out here racing at a national level and racing really well up towards the front.
Yes, and that's an incredible journey, but I often say a journey is only as good as the person doing it, and Zach Gilmore is there's not many people I can speak higher of. He's a great young lad to deal with in all aspects of life, not just as a cyclist, but just as a general person getting along at the races. So hopefully he can get a good result throughout this series, and he'll be looking towards the summer on the track again. He really does perform well in particularly the Madison, which he obviously has family history there. But Jay Vine, we've got a look on him there as well. There's a couple of young riders up here today, Matt Keenan. Blake Agnoletto in there, Jesse Norton. We also got, you mentioned before that Pat Eddy was still in there as well. That's great to see too, isn't it? Because we want to see that these young riders particularly realise that they're not that far away. They're not that far away, and if they can just get a couple of nice results, it just gives them that little bit more encouragement to keep doing all those hard training sessions.
Someone has just asked a question on the Zwift Live community about why they're all listed as a B race. That is, the women were listed as an A race, the men listed as a B race. Just this to distinguish between them on the Zwift platform as part of the National Road Series. But these events are effectively invitation only. It's not something where you can just go online and enter the event. You have to be part of the Australian National Road Series. But it's not exclusive to Australians. We've seen a German win this series overall in the past, and we've seen a Kiwi win it a couple of times.
Yes, we certainly have. And also with it being an invitation only, that's why if you are going to Zwift Power to check out today's results, there will be a slight delay in those results popping up as we have another rider from the Subaru Giant Racing team. And his teammate won the first stage. It's Jesse Norton, one of the young riders I was talking about, a local boy
Coached
from
by
Ballarat.
Pat Shaw.
And he's... Thank you for that, Matt Keenan. And not far behind him, also another Ballarat rider there in Angus Lyons. So quite a good little representation. We're looking at Lack here. Now, he was really good in the first week, Matt Keenan. Alex Lack from GPM Racing. As now it seems like he had a little mechanical there, was he? Just dropping out the back there, maybe a dropout from his trainer, but he had a good round in first round of the National Road Series and really got his name out there. And it was great to see the teams posting up social media posts as well with their riders performing or in the middle of the race on their trainers. I don't think the riders really appreciate it because you do get to see just how much pain they really are in.
Yeah, you do indeed. Now back on board with Jay Vine, who looks well within himself, heart rate at 161 beats per minute. And we know that his roof is closer towards the 200 mark as we get some footage of him with two towels across the handlebars. Jay Vine is in the comfort zone at this point.
Yes, he looks really good, but even in real life racing, he's one of the poker face riders. He does hide it well. I don't really have on memory of mine seeing him ever sort of blow up. I know that Ben Dyble's a rider that he used to be able to see. He didn't give away much, but you could tell when he was about to go. He was a poker face rider, and he obviously rides now for
Trekkie at the front.
Peloton Trekkie,
look at this, Pat.
Giving it a nudge.
From the CCS Canberra team, the leader of the In Real World National Road Series, the man that won the Melbourne to Warrnambool this year. He's at the front. He's putting the pressure on. And you can see, just as we see in the real world on Zwift, that Peloton has strung out in single file under the pressure that's been applied by Brendan Johnson.
And certainly gaps are opening up. Now we see a little bit of an ease off of the pressure, but Ben Van Dam from Bridge Lane, he comes to the front to continue that pressure. These are the type of riders that really will enjoy this type of race. Some of the younger riders slipping down the back, but Henry Dietz, he's a surprise packet there, one of the faster riders in the peloton, again from Subaru Giant Racing team, but he's right in there as well. Nick White up there, Cam Roberts, Ben Hill, they're the usual suspects that we would expect to be right there. Brendan Davids, who was an aggressive rider earlier, he's right up there for Oliver's Real Foods. It's really shaping up. We're about 13 kilometres away, so that makes us about 11 and a half before we get to the major difficulty of the day. And here's a big move out of the seat. This surge of pace on the front, again in the orange jersey. I think that might have been, I didn't grab who that was actually, but that lifted the pace quite a lot, obviously just to get in position. But certainly this pressure is starting to have an elastic band effect, and we can see the riders that are outside of that bubble in the middle of the peloton. These back 6 or 8 riders are going to be in some big trouble, Matt Keenan.
Yeah, you can see as soon as those gaps start to open up and you're making that big effort to try and get back into the slipstream, but there's no real let up. You need to be somewhere in the cockpit of the peloton, right at the front near the driver's seat without having your nose directly in the so-called wind, but you want to be sitting 3rd or 4th position, getting that bit of protection. And there's plenty of riders at the back that are trying to move their way forward as we're now on board with Luke Cridlin for the St. George Continental team, who's got himself well positioned up towards the front.
Yes, Luke Cridlin and I raced in under 11s together, Matt Keenan, and all the way through juniors.
Under 11?
He's a firefighter. We used to have the big tussle. It used to be, he was sort of, and give me a second. I know this is unrelated, but back then he was New South Wales best rider, and I was one of Victoria's. So we'd go to the junior tours, and it was this big thing, when you were 9 years old, 10 years old, you used to come against each other. We're great friends. He continues to do really well. He races in all of the major races on Zwift, represents St. George Continental, as you said, but he also is a firefighter as a job. And last round, he was actually on the trainer at the station. So it was just lucky there wasn't a call out, because he would have had to pull out quickly, jump in the truck and go and put out a fire. But albeit he got to finish the race, and he is one of the riders that can finish probably top 10 or 15 today.
Oh, that's awesome. So he's actually an essential worker. One of the things that we've worked out throughout the coronavirus is what's an essential worker and what is not an essential worker. Henry Dietz towards the front.
Bikes are essential, Matt Keenan. That's what we've found out. What level of elite are these guys in real life? Thanks for the comment, Peter. Peter, some of these riders are rivaling the best of the best, and we saw that in the summer. We spoke about Jay Vine earlier. He finished fourth overall in the Jayco Herald Sun Tour earlier this year, and that was against some of the best World Tour teams. So we're talking about really the best riders the country has to offer, certainly, but also some of the best up-and-coming riders. Out of the National Road Series in the past decade, we've probably seen 18 riders go to the World Tour through development through this series. Not particularly the virtual series, obviously in its first edition, but through the National Road Series. And some of the riders that have progressed are Paddy Bevan from the CCC team, Nathan Haas riding for Team Cofidis, Chris Hamilton riding for Team Sunweb, and that's just a list of few. Because obviously even riders like Richie Port started grinding their edge of their sword through this series. So it certainly is the pathway to the World Tour Peloton, and certainly these riders also do have the ability to push some of the world's best right to their limits.
Well, Michael Freeberg, who we've seen on the screen a couple of times, he's been a world champion on the track in the Omnium, and he won the National Australian Road Championships in 2018, where he got the better of the likes of Cameron Meyer, who was at the front in with a big chance to win. And we've seen Cameron Meyer win stages in World Tour races in Europe. And Cameron Meyer's been a multiple world champion on the track as well. And you had the rest of the Mitchelton Scott team back in the distance, and Michael Freeberg was winning there, and now we're seeing him here in this race. And a guy like Nick White, who we've spoken about, he's not far away from making that step up. Dylan Kennett, who I mentioned at the start of this, he won the Tour of Taihu Lake last year, and he was a stage winner the year before. In that race, you have teams that get the wildcard invitation to the Tour de France, and he's been able to beat the likes of those guys. So the standard of the riders here, it is just on the brink for a lot of them, for quite a few of them, of being able to make that transition up to World Tour level. Need to get the opportunity, and as you mentioned, Pat, there's probably been somewhere in the vicinity of 18 riders who've made that transition over the past decade. Cam Roberts, who was the winner of the SRAM Send It series in 2019, this is a guy that you're a big rap for.
Well, particularly in the Zwift world, he's incredibly strong, and he's known throughout the world on Zwift, whether it be in the UK or America. Riders that race on Zwift know Cam Roberts. He is one of the favourites for today. He'll be eager to show what he's got to offer, and he's definitely one we've got to keep an eye on. I spoke about Aidan Sinclair earlier, one of the younger riders in the peloton. He sits on the wheel of his teammate Brendan Davids, the South African from Oliver's Real Foods. Right up there, Tyler Lindorf as well. These are all riders we expect to do good results today. One we didn't expect was Henry Dietz. He's certainly one of the great young riders coming up through the series, but certainly he's not known for his climbing. But this is a great effort for him, being in there and holding in strong. Blake Agnoletto is also one of those young riders as well. So right in there, Miles Stewart still doing well, as you mentioned earlier, Matt Keenan. So that's good to see. And Reece Tucknott, we keep bringing him up. He's right up there as well.
The apprentice. The apprentice is up towards the front. And Team Bridge Lane have just joined the conversation on the Zwift Community Live by reminding us The two most recent ones that have made the step up that were in the series last year, Chris Harper has gone from Team Bridge Lane to now be riding with Lotto Jumbo, and Dylan Sunderland has made the step up to NTT. So you can see that transition has been happening successfully. In fact, Jumbo Visma, as the team is now known, but when Chris Harper signed with the team at the end of last year, it was Lotto Jumbo, now Jumbo Visma. So this is a high level of racing in the Australian National Road Series.
Yes, and we spoke about Ben Dybel earlier, one of the world's best watts per kilo rider. Incredible efforts in the ascent up Mount Fuji. So he also turned into the World Tour Peloton last year, and he is a alumni of the now Bridge Lane, but previously the Genesis, and also the many other names that both Andrew Christie Johnson and his compatriot Steve Price have filtered riders through the program. Angus Lyons on screen, young Ballarat rider. He's got the deep dishes in with the discs in today, Matt Keane. He's not going for lightweight in his products, but just so people at home know, you can change your bikes in game as well, and also the materials. So your wheels, your frame set. As you see also riders, it's not compulsory to wear a helmet. So there's certain things you can do, and to do that, as you ride kilometres on Zwift or have achievements, you will get given sweat drops, and then you can spend them in the drop shop, and you can buy materials like deep dish wheels. Also, you can buy disc wheels, time trial bikes, etc.
More importantly for Angus Lyons, apart from his bike, he's been dangling at the back, and he had a heart rate at more than 200 beats per minute. So he is firmly in the red zone, and I'd suggest that he's on the brink of being distanced at this point. Meanwhile, Henry Dietz is looking a lot more comfortable as Angus Lyons in the green colours of Oliver's Real Food Racing, a team that's had a pretty good impact on the National Road Series over the last couple of years. Henry Dietz doing really well.
They also had a good result in round one with 11th and 12th, Matt, but I think that they'll be looking for a better result here today. They want to sneak into that top 10 and get some good points. Let's have a quick look at where the points were allocated in that first round. It was Graham Frisley with maximum points, and reminding people at home, it's the top 10 riders that receive points in the series each round. Nick White was in second, Jay Vine, followed by young Pat Eddy, Harley Moore, Will Golding, Cam Roberts, Ben Van Dam, Ben Hill, and rounding out the top 10 for the ARA Pro Cycling Sunshine Coast team is Alistair Donoghue in round one. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shapes up. We're about 4 kilometres or 3.5 kilometres away from where it really starts to get hard, but this pinch here at 6% will be a little bit of an appetizer for the riders.
Pat, you're in Ballarat. Angus Lyons is in Ballarat. And Tommy Ing wants to know if that was the red phone going off for Angus's heart rate.
That was the red phone going off for my heart rate as I sit on the edge of my seat before they get to this final ascent. This course was raced a couple of weeks ago in a different series, Matt, and it was one of the best finishes because you see riders, they think they look good, all of a sudden they go at the back, and other riders that are sitting in 20th or 25th position, they really storm through the pack and can come to victory. So you can have a very big behind Victor today. So don't be expecting that the rider right on front has it all sewn up in the final 500 metres because they can really come from the back.
Pat, Peter Schindler has asked the question. We'll go to this one first. Can't wait for the final KOM. It is brutal. Have ridden up it a few times behind these guys on the Tour for All this week. I did the Tour for All this week, and the climb was huge.
Big shout out to Tim Searle too, Matt Keenan. He's one of the most avid Zwifters on the platform, and also is the ride leader of the Aussie Day Hump ride on a Wednesday. So big shout out to Timmy Searle. And he knows every road like the back of his hand on here. As we see, Nick White has surged himself to the front. Siwek from Van Dam Racing has followed him. They have a small gap. It's about 2 seconds in time. And then it is Tyler Lindorf. He's not going to be interested in closing the gap. And Trekkie now making his way across. Ben Van Dam, he's going to join and make a trio up front. Cam Roberts He now surges. All of the big players coming to the front, Matt Keenan.
We're getting down to the last 5 kilometres. Peter Schindler has asked the question about, is this a teams race or individual race? Peter, they are racing as teams, as part of the National Road Series. But, Pat, how can you work together as a team on Zwift in virtual racing?
Well, particularly right now, we see Ben Van Dam going off the front. He can force the pack to ride at a higher rate to bring him back before this final kick up to the finish, which will fatigue the other riders. The most difficult thing about the virtual racing, unless you are communicating together in a room or over Discord or some form of chat service, you don't really know how each other's feeling. So you could think, oh, in real life racing, this would be perfect lead out for my teammate. But in fact, they're already struggling. So there's only way you can really help your teammates is to try and bring back a breakaway rider or force the pace by attacking before the major difficulty, which we're about to hit.
We've spoken a few times about Henry Dietz, and Ag Giramondo, the president from the Brunswick Cycling Club, has wanted to join the conversation, and rightly so, and has praised Henry for his discipline. And I've had the pleasure of watching a number of the young riders come up through Brunswick, and they're doing a fantastic job of providing a great environment for them to really enjoy the sport, number one. And they're seeming to produce a lot of really good young riders. Henry Dietz is one of them. Graham Frisley is another. And there you can see the post from Ag Giramondo. Henry is another product of that fantastic environment at the Brunswick Cycling Club.
Oh, yes, culture is everything, and a strong believer of that. And it's great to have others around you that you know you can trust and see their journey before you get to that point in your career. Jay Vine still looking pretty good, out of the seat, stretching the legs before this next major part. So 2.5 kilometres to go, Matt Ken. 1.5 kilometres of that is the most difficult part of the race. More surges of pace coming towards the front. Really don't see that reaction coming too much from Jay Vine's action there. He looks really, really good, doesn't he? Not moving too much on the bike, really holding his form quite well.
Yeah, he looks rock solid. I imagine he does a fair bit of core strength work as well to be so firm on the bike. They've got less than a kilometre before they really hit the climb in earnest, and there are some brutally steep pinches at the start with gradients of 16, 17%. And Pat, we can see the virtual jostling for position as riders are trying to make sure that they're towards the front before they hit the base of the climb.
Oh, yes, because if someone leaves you a gap, Matt Keenan, it's going to be hard to get back. And even if you do, you're going to expend a lot of energy. Joe Cooper's just sent me through a message. He said, wow, that's been really hard today. So that's before the climb. And if Joe Cooper's saying that, then certainly the pressure has been on. About 27 riders. They remain in contention for the second stage of the NRS Invitational series on Zwift. And it's going to be interesting to see who can take it out. But still in there, plenty of options, and some of them we've spoken about. Others could be surprise packets.
Oh, Pat Eddy will not be a surprise packet. The rider from the Inform Make team, an Australian under-19 champion in the time trial and in the road race, one of the big rising prospects of Australian cycling, a top 10 finisher in the opening round. He is right in the mix. This is a guy, Pat Shaw, that I think we're going to be talking about for a long, long time to come at the front end of some big bike races.
Oh, I agree. He's a strong rider. We can see the finish line in the distance. We're 1 kilometre to go, Matt Keenan, and this is where they're really going to have to start to fight it out. There's quite a lot have made it to this point, and we're going to see an exciting finish, and we're going to see the power-ups. Keep your eyes peeled for the Aero power-up now because we've got a bigger group. That's the one I expect. Jay Vine, he pops the feather, or at least someone very close to him. You see the feather power-up now. There's a draft boost. That's the van in the blue. It's being popped as well, but it's the riders that are holding it out for about another 20 seconds that'll use it to their most advantage. You want to hit that power up at about the 36.8 kilometres mark of the race, which is in about 300 metres. 13% the incline. This starts to really hurt.
In the women's race, it was at this point that Justine Barrow managed to open up a gap on that really steep kicker at 15, 16%, and they were never able to reel her back in. But this group is still staying together. Ben Van Dam at the front. Ben Hill now moving up towards the head of the race. This is coming down to a real arm wrestle. This could be close. Tasman Nankervis is in the thick of the action as well.
Now you start to
Cam
see
Roberts.
Graham Frizzley's still there, Matt Keenan. Cam Roberts, should I say there. Luke Cridlin right up there. All the power-up boosts being pumped. That's the feather. It makes you more light by 9.5 kilograms. That's going to help a lot. Oh, who's going to take it out? Now we start to see Jay Vine. He's out of the seat. He's pushing hard on the pedals, trying to make this the winning move, and it could well be the winning move. He's got a good gap, about 2 seconds. Nick White, Tom Benton, and Alistair Christie-Johnson, they start to surge the pace to come across. Tasman Nankervis, Ben Hill, and Cam Roberts, who we spoke about earlier, they're also right there.
It's Jay Vine with a gap ahead of Nick White. It was Nick White who was second in round 1. He's second on the road in round 2. And Jay Vine, the winner of the opening round of the SRAM Send It series on Tuesday. He timed his run to perfection then. He's timed his run well today. And he's using pure strength to blow the rest of the peloton away. He's searching for the finish line. It can't be too far away. The gap, though, now is out to 6 seconds. He's in the box seat to take out round number 2, and he will be the leader of the series. He can see the finish line just in the distance. He can smell victory. Jay Vine to take the win, and also to take, or is he?
Well, will he take the win?
Caught by CJ. Alistair Christie-Johnson just on the line. Momentum as Vine has come to a grinding halt, and Christie-Johnson has managed to get the timing right. So Jay Vine going just a little bit too soon. And it's Christie-Johnson who gets the win. And then it's Van Dam, followed by Hill. And Vine has slipped through to 4th position. So Vine went a little bit too early, and Christie-Johnson taking the victory.
Yes, it looks like it's a 3-way Bridge Lane podium, but we're going to go and have a look. We'll have a look at the replay in a moment. Pat, I think no.
I thought he had that all sewn up. He had a 6-second gap with a couple of 100 meters to go, but clearly the system was full of lactic acid. He was deep into the red zone, just went that smidgen too early and got reeled back in.
Well, and who knows, he might have had an issue as well, but we don't know about that, so we can only take it on the information we've got. But I did see this same course raced a few weeks ago in a different series, as we see the replay now, and this is this mushroom cloud above Vine. It's Alistair Christie-Johnson that takes the victory, and what a move it was at the right time. Ben Van Dam came over the top to finish second, and Ben Hill filled out the podium with 3rd. But I was saying last time I watched this course, a very similar thing happened. A rider had 4 seconds and lost the race. It was Tyler Lindorff, and Cooper Sayers got right up there in 5th as well today. So that's a great result. And we'll wait for the rest of the results to come through. I was just trying to look at the screen there for the results, Matt Keenan, but that's what I was waiting for, that really great finish, and we got it.
I'm waiting to hear the full story as well from Jay Vine to see what did happen, whether it was simply just timing or whether it was an issue or not. He looked good, and it was just that last couple of 100 meters. We're going to see if we can take a look at Jay Vine, as we've had the opportunity to take a look at Jay and also Bree as they've been racing. Here's confirmation from the women's race. It was Justine Barrow who took the win ahead of Emma Chilton. Bree Wilson was 3rd. Georgia Whitehouse was 4th. In the men's race, it was Alistair Christie-Johnson who took out the win, and it was timing that was everything for him in the end. And Pat, you know this team as well as anybody. It's a team that you spent most of your career with racing on the National Road Series. I get the impression you'd be pretty happy to see the name of Christie-Johnson at the top of the results sheet.
Oh, yeah. I'm really happy to see any of these riders get a win or get themselves up there and show what they're capable of. But Alistair's usually one that's doing work for his teammates. So great to see him today get a chance to go for the win himself. And I tell you, Ben Van Dam, got to tip your hat to him as well. He rode a really good race. He was always at the front, and a smart race indeed for him today as well. So Bridge Lane will be happy to take the top 3 positions, but I think they would have liked Nick White to pick up a few more points as well.
Yeah, but for Christie-Johnson, he's a good time trialist. So he's got good prospects in this series long term.
Yeah, Ben Van Dam will do a good time trial as well on the Bologna course. Remember the Bologna course, it's 50-50, 50% flat, 50% uphill in time. And so it will be interesting. Remember in the Giro, the riders actually swapped out bikes. That's how hard that final climb is. So it'll be interesting to see the tactics that riders use on that particular race. And I think you and I really enjoyed calling that one because minute intervals, it's going to be interesting. It'll be like calling the real life time trial of the Tour de France.
Now let's take a look at the results. It was Alistair Christie-Johnson taking the win ahead of his teammate Ben Van Dam and another teammate, Ben Hill, in third position. And the exploding Jay Vine was in fourth place. It was then Cooper Sayers in fifth. Tom Benton was in sixth position. Tyler Lindorth in seventh place. Nick White in eighth. Jordan Dawson in ninth. And Tasman Nankervis rounding out the top 10. Nick White looked pretty good up until the last little pinch on that climb. More noted as a strong sprinter. He likes the punchy little climbs. It got the better of him today. Jay Vine, third in the first race, fourth in this race. Jay, that was tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I went a bit too soon. Couldn't quite.
Haven't got volume there, Jay, unfortunately. All right.
Try again, Jay.
Yeah, so it was really tough. I went a bit too early and they caught me on the flat. Didn't quite have enough for the pinch at the end there.
Well, I was calling it, Jay, as if you'd had it sewn up.
No, not quite. Unfortunately, I could see him coming and all I could manage was about 7 watts per kilo, which wasn't enough.
I've never heard the expression all I could manage was 7 watts per kilo. Most people normally boast about 7 watts per kilo. But you're the leader of the series. Gives you good hope for the rest of the series to be able to win this thing overall.
Yeah, I mean, the courses I'm most looking forward to are the Bologna TT and the round 6 over those 2 big climbs. So to get a 4th place here and take control of the series is pretty good.
How are you managing your time training-wise? Sorry, Pat. But Jay, I'm interested to know how you're managing your time training-wise between training on Zwift and training outdoors.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much doing all my intensity on Zwift with races and doing big, long 4-hour rides outside when I get the chance.
Over to you, Pat.
I was just saying that the big movers today is Ben Van Dam and Ben Hill. So now you sort of start to select those riders that are close to the top. Will you race a bit differently? Will you try and follow those riders a bit more in the next few stages and just try and stay close to them on the flatter courses? Or do you just keep being aggressive as that's your nature?
So I think Zwift really punishes aggressiveness. So just sitting in the bunch and playing at courses is probably the way to go.
Very good, mate. Congratulations.
Well,
another good result. Unfortunately, you fell apart a little bit there, but it does happen, even to the best of the best. And all the best in a fortnight's time. We look forward to seeing you at SRAM Senate Series.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Bye.
Well, that tells the story, Pat Shaw. It wasn't a mechanical, it was a physical.
Yes, and good on him for calling it that way too, because you could easily, and I know many that would, have called it a mechanical given the right opportunity. So what a great athlete and a great race today. That's round 2, Matt Keenan. It was fantastic.
Yeah, the most surprising thing that came out of that interview was I was only doing 7 watts per kilo.
Oh, yeah, he was phenomenal. So strong there too. So
big numbers.
Yeah.
Awesome athlete. Fantastic. So he leads the series. It was Alistair Christie-Johnson taking out the win today. It was Justine Barrow who won the women's race. In a fortnight's time, we'll be back with more Pat Shaw, and I can't wait to continue the National Road Series here on Zwift. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, from both myself, Matt Keenan, and Pat Shaw, it's bye for now.